Good morning, class. Continuing the previous group's discussion of style, context, and register, we would like to uncover the remaining subtopics, which are context, style, and class, and register. We are group 8, and these are the members of the group. First, let's talk about context, style, and class, which is going to be discussed by me, Diaz Adrian. Formal context and social roles. In example 12, the choice of appropriate form is influenced not by the personal relationship between the participants, rather by the formality of the context and their relative roles and statuses within that setting. As we can see in example 12, we are given an example of a law court setting. A law court is an example of a formal setting where the social roles of participants override their personal relationship in determining the appropriate linguistic forms. Different style within an interview. In a social dialect survey done by William LeBoeuf in New York City, William LeBoeuf asked his interviewees to read aloud a passage of continuous speech and a set of minimal pairs. The result was the speakers used fewer vernacular forms in these styles compared to the interview style. One speaker, for instance, named Tom, used 2% vernacular forms in reading minimal pairs, 30% in reading a passage, and 65% in interview style. LeBoeuf describes the vernacular as the style in which the minimum of attention is given to the monitoring of speech. In other words, it is a person's most basic style. Colloquial style or the vernacular. There are many features which distinguish colloquial from more formal styles of English. In Tennessee, for example, vernacular me, instead of my, is used by working-class schoolchildren to tease or express disapproval in stylist performances. For instance, in "then me mate arrives" rather than "then my mate arrives." And the second example is the use of them instead of those as a determiner. For example, in "there's a crosspiece in the mold facing doors." Now, both of the instances I have mentioned were actually quite common in some regions of the world. Well, in Tasmania and New Zealand, one interesting feature is the use of animation for objects. She, the pronoun she, is often used to refer to animals or inanimate objects which are the center of attention in the story being told. For example, in She's a Hard Road, in describing a road, and in She Was a Real Beauty That Storm, in describing a storm. The interaction of social class and style. A low frequency of vernacular pronunciations or a higher frequency of standard pronunciations may therefore signal that the speaker belongs to a high social class, or indicate that they are speaking in a more formal context, or even both. The speech of each social group remains in the same relationship to other groups, whatever the style. In the given figure, social group 4 uses more vernacular pronunciations than every other group. In order for them to sound more formal in the formal context, they use people from a higher or more sophisticated social group as their speech models. And in general, the lower social groups shift their speech more often as they move from one style to another than the higher social groups do.
Hello, my name is Dimas Prasetyo and my student number is 070, and I will continue the presentation about the hypercorrection. So it is the middle lower class go beyond the upper middle class norms to produce a style which can be described, perhaps somewhat ironically, as more correct than the standard hypercorrect speech. Hypercorrect usage goes beyond the norm. It involves extending a form beyond the standard itself. So the next is register. Register is the language variation which is influenced by change in situational factors such as addressing, setting, task, or topic. Others use the term register more narrowly to describe the specific vocabulary associated with the different occupational groups. The next is sports announcer talk. It is a play-by-play description focuses on the action, as opposed to color commentary, which refers to the more discursive and leisurely speech with which commentators fill in the often quite long spaces between spurts of action. This involves features such as syntactic reduction and the inversion of normal word order in sentences. The next is syntactic reduction. Uh, when sport announcers describe the action they are observing, sport announcers often omit the subject, noun, or pronoun and frequently omit the verb be as well. There is no loss of meaning as a result of this syntactic reduction, since the omitted elements are totally predictable in the context.
Hello everyone, I'm Abdikatasli Amrullah. My student number is 053. Here I would like to continue the explanation about the feature of sport announcer talk. First I would like to explain syntactic inversion. In syntactic inversion, the normal word order is syntactically reversed or inversed, so announcers are able to focus or foreground on the action. This feature provides more time to identify the subject of the actions, which also an important information to the listeners. Let us pay attention to the examples 25. It is the case from baseball or cricket commentaries. The foreground for all of these examples are the action of each player, such as in A, in comes, which is the action from Gowrie, or in C, on deck, which is the action from Big Dave Winfield, and so on. The next feature is heavy non-modification. In the case that people are the focus of interest rather than the action, the people, which is the subject nouns, are modified heavily, and the modification may take place both after or before the noun, as illustrated in the example 26. The example 26 are taken from baseball or cricket commentaries. In the example A, the clause, the $25 million man who is hitting 056 in the World Series is post-noun modification of the player, noun, David Winfield. And for B and C, the subject is placed after the modification. It is Larry Burnett, and in C is fast bowler. The next I would like to explain about routines and formula. Routines used to reduce the memory burden. In situation when the memory burden of the information is a lot but have to be simultaneously processed and delivered in fast and fluent way. For instance, in the race calling, the commentary that accompany horse race, the register in such situation are characterized by extensive use of oral formulas, in which the formulas involve a small number of fixed syntactic patterns and a narrow range of lexical items. Here is the examples from Rayon Murta in his commentary on 2000 meter hit for the Lion Brown Championship. From this example beside, it is the example of play-by-play commentary, a description about the ongoing race, which constructed in a set of predetermined formulas into which the horse's name are inserted. It is again characterized by a narrow range of syntactic and lexical choices. This can be illustrated by looking at the possible ways of communicating, such as in A, which indicates the race has started, and B indicates the position of the horses. These are both elements of play-by-play description of the race which are conveyed formulaically. The illustrations are below. It is the first A, the start formula, This shows the lexical choices that indicates the start of the race in fixed formulas, such as they are away or they are off. It is indicate that the race is ongoing. And B, it is the horse locator formula, the horse name, white out on the outside of another horse. Those are the indication of position of horses to one another in fixed formulas. The specific features of the formulas are not arbitrary. It depended on the context. For instance, the syntactic inversion, which was noted in the examples 25 as a feature of baseball and cricket commentary, it also occurs as a feature of race calling formulas, such as in the example 27, one tip out was my Delroy. The use of passive, it allows more time for the announcer to identify the host before have to name the host. Something that is also important is that the pattern of sounds in race calling are also distinctive. The race callers use particular intonation patterns or tunes as they call the race. For instance, in New Zealand and Australia, the distinctive sound patterns used by race callers has been described as a drone. The figure we can see it beside. The New Zealand race caller's voice pitch rises by about an octave during the race and drops rapidly back to the initial pitch after the finish. So, the distinctive intonation contours used by different sports announcers in the course of their work are another feature of this identified linguistic register. Race scholars must keep talking and fast and show impression of fluency, in which the pauses and hesitations, for instance, are unacceptable. Race scholars speak at 4 to 5 syllables per second. The use of formula allows them to convey information with a minimum demand on short-term memory. They tend to use the volume and intonation to retain the listener's interest and convey the drama of the action. The linguistic features which develop as characteristic of a register are clearly functionally motivated. The demand of the particular context in which the language is used influences its shape. The specialized registers of occupational groups develop to distinguish their communication from those of other groups. And over time, the language of such groups develops more and more their own characteristics, such as in terms of lexical, syntactical, and even phonological. Well, no, we are in the last section of the presentation, and I would like to wrap up our presentation's topic, which comes to these conclusions. People's styles of speech and written communication index indicates the context in which the language is being used. The way people talk is influenced by and simultaneously contributes to the formality of those contexts and social roles people take in them. The way people write letters, emails, and text messages, and blog entries similarly indicates the awareness of the different audiences of these different genres. By this, people are adapting or accommodating the language to an audience. The discussion of register differences introduced the idea that style may be influenced by the function in which the language is serving. That is all from my group. I hope it will give you an insight regarding to the topic, and thank you for your attention and see you in the next opportunity.